In this video, I'll show you the top 3 best openings against White's first move pawn to e4. Whether you want solid defense, sharp counterplay, or tricky traps, these openings will give you powerful weapons to fight back right from the start. Let's dive in. Here is the most common chess opening position, and now let's talk about the different moves your opponent might choose. They could develop their knight, go for a more aggressive knight attack, or simply castle. But if your opponent decides to castle, this usually safe move actually turns into a big mistake. You can capture the pawn on e4 with your knight, and when white brings the rook to e1, it may look like you are in trouble. Your knight can be attacked, and your king looks exposed. However, you have the strong move pawn to d5, which completely shuts down white's plan. After pawn to d5, not only do you defend your knight, but you also attack white's bishop on c4. This usually forces white to move the bishop away, and at this stage, they still feel optimistic. They see that your knight is pinned, so knight takes a5 looks like a threat, and they also imagine pushing pawn to d3 to kick your knight and build pressure along the e-file. But all of those plans are crushed by your precise move, bishop to c5. Now you're counterattacking hard and ignoring everything white wants to do. From here, bishop takes f2 becomes a deadly threat, forking their king and rook. To stop that, white will likely push pawn to d4. After the exchange and knight recapture, it might look like white is starting some kind of attack. Your knight is pinned and under pressure, and even your other knight is pinned. It appears dangerous. But you stay calm and simply castle. With that, the pin is gone, your king is safe, and suddenly your knight is free to strike. Now you're directly threatening to capture their knight on d4. At this point, white must react, because you are already up a pawn and have the more active position. If they try to simplify by trading knights, you have a brilliant in-between move. Instead of recapturing right away, you strike with bishop takes f2 check, delivering a double attack. After the king moves, you have multiple ways to win. One powerful continuation is queen to h4, piling on threats against white's rook, knight, and king. And if white tries to move the rook out of danger, you even have a sneaky checkmate waiting. Going back to the critical position, if white decides to capture your knight with their bishop instead, the situation becomes even worse for them. You immediately unleash another strong check, dragging their king out into the open. From there, you continue your attack relentlessly. Another check follows, forcing the king to run, and now your bishop jumps into the action, attacking their queen while still pressuring the bishop. You're also up 2 pawns in the process. And if white dares to capture your bishop, queen takes a 1 seals the game completely, leaving them utterly destroyed. The second most common mistake from white comes when they try to launch the famous fried liver attack. In this position, you have a surprising counterstrike. Knight takes a 4. I personally love playing this gambit in blitz games because the resulting positions are extremely sharp and unfamiliar to most opponents. 99% of players don't really know how to deal with it. At first glance, it seems white's idea should work. They push their knight to g5, threatening to capture on f7 with a fork against your queen and rook. Many players believe this guarantees them a winning position, but in reality, this move is already a decisive mistake if they don't know the theory. With the powerful reply queen to h4, you immediately launch a dangerous counterattack that white simply cannot defend. For instance, if white tries to castle, thinking it's the safest way to guard the pawn on f2, you unleash a shocking knight sacrifice on f2. This not only hits the queen, but also opens the door for bishop to c5, pinning and attacking the rook twice. White suddenly finds themselves completely overwhelmed, and what looked like an attack for them quickly turns into a devastating disaster. White now has to find a solution, because not only are you threatening immediate tactics, but their bishop is also hanging. The most common move they try is queen to f3, aiming to hold the position together. However, after rook to f8, your pressure becomes absolutely unbearable. There are simply too many threats for white to manage. On top of that, the move knight to d4 looms as well, piling on even more problems. Usually, white plays pawn to g3 to chase your queen away, but that only speeds up their collapse. You capture the rook with check, then take their bishop, and since their knight remains pinned, you keep collecting pieces one after another. Within just a few moves, you've gained a full rook advantage, and white's position is in ruins. If you've been following me for a while, you already know that one of the most brutal ways to dismantle the Italian game is with the Russo Gambit, where you immediately challenge white's center. The fascinating part is that white's most popular response, accepting the gambit pawn, is already a mistake. It allows you to push your central pawn forward, forcing their knight into a miserable retreat. From there, the position is highly uncomfortable for white. If they try to pin your pawn with counterattack, you simply mirror the idea with a symmetrical move, keeping your center strong. White is left with no good squares for their knight, and in most cases, it has to retreat all the way back to its starting square. After that, you develop your knight to f6 with ease, while white's pieces are clumsy and undeveloped. Step by step, their normal Italian setup turns into a passive, cramped disaster, while you dominate the board. Because of all this pressure, white is completely unable to castle safely. If they try pawn to d3, hoping for a simple pawn trade, they might imagine that after an exchange of queens, they'll reach a calm endgame with an extra pawn. But instead, you turn the tables with the powerful move knight to d4. This hits both the queen and the pawn on c2 at the same time. At this point, white is in a very difficult position. Their queen is forced to retreat to either d1 or d2 to defend the pawn on c2. But this move doesn't solve their problems. It actually makes them worse. With their queen tied down, they have no active play left, and suddenly the board is wide open for your tactical strikes. Imagine your opponent glances away for a moment, thinking they're safe, and when they look back, you execute knight takes c2, a crushing fork that hits both their king and rook simultaneously. Even though this costs you a knight, it's a small price for the cascade of attacks it unleashes. Right after, you follow up with another double threat, targeting key squares and pieces, leaving white completely overwhelmed and their position collapsing. But this isn't just a single tactical trick. It's a pattern that white can't escape from. If they try to avoid pawn to d3 and instead develop their other knight, you're still in total control. You can play knight to d4 again, hitting both the queen and the vulnerable pawn on c2. White has no choice but to retreat their queen all the way back to d1, losing precious time while you continue to build threats across the board. Their pieces remain cramped, uncoordinated, and under constant attack. Every move white makes is forced, while your pieces dominate the board. Knights centralized, bishops controlling key diagonals, and rooks ready to strike. Gradually, white's development crumbles, leaving you in full control and turning a standard opening into a tactical nightmare. From here, your attack doesn't slow down for even a moment. You strike with pawn to d5. This is a bold move, willingly sacrificing a pawn just to accelerate your development and open lines for your pieces. After the trades in the center and bishop takes f5, the board suddenly shifts in your favor. You now have a raging initiative with multiple deadly threats. One idea is to push your central pawn forward, opening the diagonal for your dark squared bishop, and then deliver knight takes c2 with a crushing fork. Another possibility is queen to c5, hitting both the bishop and the loose pawn at the same time. Or you can simply castle, which not only secures your king, but also brings another attacker onto the bishop. In every line, you enjoy a massive lead in development, while white's pieces are clumsy and uncoordinated. And if white tries something like pawn to c3, hoping to chase away your knight, you spring yet another tactical blow. Instead of retreating, your knight jumps forward with check. If it gets captured, that only opens a devastating discovered attack along the e-file. White's king is forced into a terrible position. Moving to f1 isn't an option because of an immediate bishop check that nearly mates on the spot. If they instead try knight to e2, then the real knockout comes. At first glance, you'd love to play queen takes e2 checkmate, but the knight is guarded. So, you deflect the defender with the brilliant bishop to c2. The queen is forced away, and now queen takes e2 becomes unavoidable, ending the game in spectacular fashion. Thanks for watching.